Welcome back to English Einsteins. I've helped many students increase their grades significantly as a teacher and tutor. I'm a GCSE examiner, so I know exactly what is needed for your exams. Make sure you watch the end to see my top tip for language paper 2. On that note, let's start with the question 5 mark scheme. I've marked the most important criteria that will make your writing stand out. For the first one, register means the correct way of writing, i.e., have you set it out like an article or a leaflet like you were asked to? Matched to the audience means have you been formal if it's addressed to a head teacher, or more light-hearted if it's addressed to other students? Vocabulary goes without saying. Use words from literature here in persuasive writing. For example, tyrannical, misanthropic, duplicitous. Linguistic devices. You have to construct your own similes, metaphors, personification. Also, wide range of punctuation. So we will incorporate colons and semicolons in this video. This is the question we will look at. Social media should be banned for those under 18. Write an article for a newspaper in which you argue your point of view on this topic. Firstly, you need to plan your point of view. This is the structure I coach my students to use. As you can see, it spells EPIC with 3 I's. E stands for establish the audience, P picture this, I imagine, I for information, I for remember a time when, and C for conclusion. We'll go through each of these subheadings now. Firstly, you need to show that you know your audience. Who is reading your article? Where are they sitting? What might be distracting them? What questions related to the topic might be going through their mind? So answer those questions now. And then you put this information in. So as you sit on your comfortable leather chair, scrolling through TikTok, there's probably one question racing through your overstimulated mind. Is this doing me any good? So a question like that that's relevant to the topic. Then this is a quick way to get semicolons in. Semicolons separate main clauses. You're going to use this to show how strongly you feel about the topic. It is a disgrace. It is a scandal. It is an outrage that children as young as 3 are hooked on social media. Okay, so semicolon between each one of those main clauses. This is the paragraph as a whole for establish your audience when you put it together. So as you sit there scrolling through TikTok, there's probably one question racing through your overstimulated mind. Is this doing me any good? To that I say it's unquestionably a disgrace. It's undoubtedly an outrage. It is indisputably a scandal that 3-year-olds are hooked on social media. Something along those lines. You're establishing your audience. Picture this paragraph. This is where you describe what the worst outcome is if your opinion isn't achieved. Children following negative role models, for example. You can give specific role models that you know of that you think are negative. For example, Andrew Tate's misogyny. You could say bullying is exacerbated, made worse, trolling, suicide, a lack of sleep and education because of social media. This is how you stand out, though, by using a metaphor, in my opinion. Maybe you could say social media is a villain stealing children's innocence away. Picture this as a quick way to get a colon in as you are introducing something. You describe the worst outcome now. So picture this, a dystopian world full of perpetual misery. That's how you start off. Here are lots of key words you can use for your picture this dystopian image that you're creating. Take 5 minutes to construct your picture this paragraph. Imagine paragraph, the first I, we're going to depict a utopia, the complete opposite of what we just did in the last paragraph. So in this one, children are all liberated from imprisonment. They have the gift of sleep given back to them, the blessing of education. They gain confidence now they stop looking at unrealistic, filtered role models. They avoid the tyrannical trolls of TikTok. These are the sentence starters you can use for the imagine paragraph. Now imagine a world where, and then you put your information in that we just talked about. Visualize a world where this happened, a society where this happens. This could be a reality if we limit social media for under 18-year-olds. Okay, you're arguing your point, you're getting your audience to agree with you. And the second I stands for information. This is where you have to give credible, respectful statistics or interview findings. I believe one statistic from a study and one interview quote from a reputable source, all made up, of course, are ideal for this paragraph. So, for example, 67% of students are underachieving as a result of social media. Or in an interview with Dr. DeFriend from Harvard University, he noted, if children do not stop scrolling, social media will consume the youth in its insatiable stomach. Okay, so you're given statistics and an interview there, both from reputable sources like doctors and from universities that really give evidence for your point. The third I stands for I can't help but remember a time when. So you make up an anecdote to support your persuasive argument. Anecdote is a short story. It can be real or imagined. For example, I can't help but recall a time when my friend became very anxious and depressed and she wouldn't come out of her house because she had kept comparing herself to filtered role models on social media. For the C, at the end of Epic, you have to think, what doubts might the reader still have? And how could you rebuff them? How could you answer those doubts? You say, you may still be left with the idea that social media is an acceptable habit to nurture in children. However, it is absurd to believe this. It is frying your brain cells in an internal furnace. Something really powerful like that. Another metaphor. And then you finish with a to is to sentence. For example, to blindly scroll on is to lose yourself in the abyss. The to is to finisher is a one sentence paragraph. You fill in the blanks. For example, to watch this is to do well. I've just filled in the spaces, literally. That's all I've done. So to blindly scroll on is to lose yourself in the abyss. Guys, if you want to invest in your education and proven strategies for English GCSE, email englisheinsteins@outlook.com. Back to the video then. This is for question 1, 2, and 3. We're going to look at this extract here. It's a hanging of a murderer in 1840. Courvoisier bore his punishment like a man and walked very firmly. He was dressed in a new black suit, as it seemed. His shirt was open. His arms were tied in front of him. He opened his hands in a helpless kind of way and clasped them once or twice together. He turned his head here and there and looked about him for an instant with a wild, imploring look. His mouth was contracted into a sort of pitiful smile. He went and placed himself at once under the beam, with his face towards St. Sepulchre's. The tall, grave man in black twisted him round swiftly in the other direction, and, drawing from his pocket a nightcap, pulled it tight over the patient's head and face. I am not ashamed to say that I could look no more, but shut my eyes as the last dreadful act was going on which sent this wretched, guilty soul into the presence of God. Right, pause the video there. I want you to choose 4 out of 8 statements that are true down the bottom there. Preparing for question 2 then. Where it says he clasped his hands once or twice together, what could it suggest? He clasped his hands together, maybe desperation, anxiety, a nice word for anxiety, trepidation. Maybe he's praying to God for forgiveness and mercy. Okay, there's multiple interpretations already there. You don't have to do language analysis for question 2 here. So you don't have to say the verb clasp suggests this. Then he looked about with a wild, imploring look. This also indicates desperation. Imploring means he's begging for forgiveness. Wild denotes he's been dehumanized, he's animalistic. Maybe he's lost all his humanity through all of his sinful actions, that sort of thing. Okay, so for question 2, you just need to talk about what the quotes imply. And this is the layout for what I would do for question 2. Using details from text 1, write a summary of the behavior of the man about to be executed. So using those quotes from the previous slide, in text 1, the behavior of the man is desperate or inhumane. For example, and then you put one of the quotes in and tell me what it implies. The behavior of the man is also this. For example, put the other quote in and tell me what it implies. I'm not going to read through two sources for one question right now, but here is a model answer for question 2 on a different topic. So the writer of source A tries many known cures, for example, giving up coffee, sugar, heavy dinners to help her sleep, which implies that she relies on scientific research and understanding because these are well-known barriers to sleep, and so the failure of these techniques could by proxy reveal a failure of science. However, the writer of source B follows her instincts rather than science, wrongly assuming you're hungry, yes, that must be it, which implies that she listens to her natural impulses rather than science because she is responding to her body and feelings. So notice you make a point, use a quote, say what the quote means, then compare to the other source. That's what you need to do for question 2. Question 3 is language analysis. It's 12 marks, so you need to write at least 3 paragraphs for this question. So we're going to look at a few more quotes in more detail now. So Thackeray says that Courvoisier opened his hands in a helpless kind of way and clasped them once or twice together. In other words, maybe you could say he has a paucity of hope, which means a lack of hope. He's despairing and powerless. Next one, the verb clasped is unsettling because it suggests he's anxious and trepidatious, or perhaps praying for salvation. Thackeray describes Courvoisier as a wretched, guilty soul. In other words, he thinks Courvoisier deserves condemnation or damnation. The adjective wretched implies he finds the murderer barbaric, devilish, monstrous. Thackeray states that Courvoisier was sent into the presence of God. Metaphorically, Thackeray means that he will receive eternal spiritual imprisonment or hell. Notice how we have included word types such as adjective, verbs, and techniques such as metaphorically for question 3, because we're doing language analysis. So for question 3, how does the writer use language to describe Courvoisier's execution? Thackeray chooses to depict Courvoisier's execution as unsettling. So we've answered the question really in the topic sentence there, but we need quotes to back it up. So for example, we can use the quote, open his hands in a helpless kind of way and clasp them once or twice together. And then you say, in other words, this shows here the paucity of hope and he's despairing. More specifically, the verb clasp suggests he's anxious and trepidatious because it seems as though he's praying for forgiveness. So a different extract for question 4. This question, we're looking for the writer's attitudes towards a topic. This one is all about the writer's attitudes towards young women. So listen up for their attitudes towards young women as we read through. This is from 1883. So the liberty allowed to young girls grows yearly more and more unchecked. They walk alone, travel alone, visit alone. And the gravest evils have been known to arise from the habit which modern mothers have of sending their daughters of 16 and upwards unaccompanied in London to colleges and classes. Mama has grown stout and lazy and has always some more important matter on hand that keeps her at home, half asleep in the easy chair, while the girls go to and fro and take the exercise befitting their youthful energies. Of course, no harm can befall them. They are her daughters, and the warnings given by the keener-eyed who have had experience are mere inventions of the enemy and slanders against the young. So they parade the streets, dressed in the most startling and meretricious costumes. Meretricious means superficially attractive. And that fatal doctrine of self-protection counts its victims by the score as the consequence. Preparation for question 4, then we need to find quotes that show the writer's attitude towards women. So the liberty allowed to young girls grows yearly more and more unchecked. This implies that the writer thinks women's freedom should be limited and that excessive freedom is actually immoral for women. She clearly thinks that they're untrustworthy, they cannot make good decisions by themselves. The verb unchecked in particular implies she thinks they need to be guarded and policed. Then they walk alone, travel alone, visit alone. The repetition here suggests the writer feels indignant and shocked that women are unaccompanied in London. She thinks they should be escorted. Perhaps she thinks they should always be observed. Linton states that young women unaccompanied in London leads to the gravest evils. This implies that she views their liberation as immoral because their freedom leads to callous sins and causes catastrophe. It's almost like hyperbole here because she views women as duplicitous, Machiavellian, misanthropic, and alludes to the old stereotypes of women as untrustworthy because of Eve. And then last point there, they parade the streets. The verb parade implies Linton thinks the girls act provocatively, manipulatively, enticing men for their attention. They display themselves to provoke admiration and dress sexually, perhaps. And here are the sentence starters you can use for question 4. As I said, you would need 4 paragraphs at least for question 4 because it is a larger question. So make sure you do plenty of analysis about the writer's attitude, looking at techniques as well. Thank you very much, guys. See you next time.